There's a saying in game development developed by the great Todd Howard of Bethesda Game Studios, and it just goes, great games are played, not made. Simple enough statement, but that philosophy has given us some of the greatest open world experiences of all time, like Skyrim, Fallout 3, fantastic games based on that philosophy. Very wise words, Todd.
All of this just works.
Now I gotta film a video. Go back to bed. I'll be there soon. But if you took Sony's most recent design philosophy and turned it into a similar statement, it would probably go something like, great games are filled with so many microtransactions that players try to avoid playing the game at all costs to generate enough in-game currency to avoid microtransactions because that's the only reasonable way that you can play the game. Not as catchy, I grant you. That's right, we're talking about Gran Turismo 7, PlayStation's insane approach to monetization, and they're doubling down on their insane monetization strategies, even after outspoken criticisms from game review sites, the average consumer, and their most hardcore fans. I also want to point out that this is not the only time this has happened, and give you an example of another game that did this in the exact same way, just as egregiously, and I want to point out how that ended. Because let's be honest, it probably would be better for everybody if PlayStation just learned from that previous example and avoided all of this crap. But let's be real, if they were going to learn from the lesson, they would have done it already. They wouldn't be in this position. And let me be clear, I'm not trying to talk about this just to chase internet outrage or anything like that. I don't like piling on negative news just for the sake of piling onto it. But I think it's important to talk about this because the second we give a little leeway to publishers, regardless of who they are, when it comes to these extremely egregious monetization practices that are very aggressive, ruin the experience for their most hardcore fans, publishers will start to do it more. We spoke up, we made our voices heard, and most publishers have foregone those approaches. Really, like Apex is the only game nowadays that really is pushing loot boxes. Everybody else allows you to just buy the thing that you want without any sort of random element to it. So players speaking out does have an impact. It can make a difference, which is why I think it's important to talk about this and make our voices heard. So what exactly happened? Well, Gran Turismo 7, it's a racing simulator game on PlayStation, a really good one, might I add. In preparation for this video, I sat down, I played the game, I bought it with my own money, and put in a handful of hours just getting familiarized with it because I didn't want to talk about it or critique it without having any sort of hands-on experience. And I can confidently say it's a solid game, which is why it's all the more infuriating that it's so weighed down by this monetization scheme. Now, everything in the game can be purchased with the in-game currency, which is pretty common nowadays, especially in games that have heavy monetization. Already a red flag. It's not that there's an in-game XP or currency in the game and then a separate one for real-world money that can be converted into the in-game currency. At least then there's a level of separation. No, it's all the same currency, okay? That currency can be used to purchase vehicles, upgrades to the vehicles, cosmetic items, you name it. If it's in the game, it's bought with this currency. Concerning already. Now, it wouldn't be bad if the game were balanced as though no players were going to engage with monetization or engage with microtransactions at all. If the game was balanced with that expectation, we'd be fine. But the problem is when developers have that monetization scheme over here as a crutch for potential players, they tend to balance the game with the hope that more players will lean towards that monetization to balance out their experience. It's what we see in Ubisoft games, such as Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where players were able to finish the game if they played 100 hours straight through and avoided any sort of XP boost or currency farming boosts or anything else that Ubisoft sold to the player in the in-game shop. But if you wanted to have the true experience, the experience that didn't feel extremely grindy and miserable, you needed to buy those XP boosts, which could cut down your gameplay time by as much as a quarter. Like if you paid the microtransaction, it would take you 75 hours to get through the game. If you didn't, it would take you about 100 hours. That's egregious. And this is why the argument from these publishers, when they come out and say, well, we just wanted to give players options and freedom to engage with the game in a shorter amount of time if players, had busier lives than somebody else who didn't want to pay for the microtransaction. It's all BS. The game is built in a way where you can grind miserably to get to the end destination, or you can give them a little cash, get there quicker with way less headaches. And Gran Turismo 7 is probably the most unbelievably obtuse and obvious example of this in recent memory. It's honestly baffling how aggressive they've priced these items, not in a good way. So most of the best vehicles in the game cost roughly 20 million credits. It could be more than that, could be a little less than that, but we're talking tens of millions of credits. That is roughly $20 in real world money, USD. They've changed the value of the currency a little bit here and there, and it's possible they will change it again. But as of the time of this recording, that's about $20. So to get one of the best vehicles in the game, you got to spend about $20. That's a little rough, especially because there's so many vehicles that you'll want to collect if you take this game seriously. After all, this game is about collecting nice cars that you can race with. That's kind of like the whole thing. So it's $20 to buy the car outright, or you can just go and grind for it in-game by completing races and challenges or menu items through the in-game cafe, which for some reason is like a quest counter. And that will lead you to gaining more credits, and eventually you can save up and buy the car, right? Well, yeah, but it's gonna take you 4, 5, 6 hours of grinding just to get one of those vehicles. In a new analysis by fansite GT Planet, they found that Gran Turismo 7 takes far longer to earn credits naturally in the game than the recent predecessor titles. And according to that website's analysts, it could take players nearly 20 hours of grinding in order to earn enough credits to purchase just one of the game's most expensive cars. So when we talk about the premium cars, the top 10 or so, it can take you all the way up to 20 hours. Like 4 or 5 hours for one of the best cars was already a lot. 20 hours for a top of the line car is insane. And what's worse is that we can't just blame the publishers for this. We can't just say, oh, well, it's PlayStation trying to make money, because the developers are actively making the situation worse intentionally. Because there are certain races that pay out more credits than other races, and the developers have gone back into the game with recent patches to reduce, in some cases by half, the credit payout of some of the most lucrative races. So players were like, yeah, that's really sucky. I've got to grind for 4 hours to get this nice car, but I'm going to do it. Let's go for it. So they start grinding out these races that pay out a lot. The developers went in, slashed the payout for those races. So now those players are going to have to spend, in some cases, twice as long as before to grind out one of these high-level cars. And there's no real way you can spin this other than that they are simply trying to encourage and even push their players into engaging with these microtransactions, into just saying, you know what, screw it, take my $5, take my $20, take my $50, whatever it is for what car. I just want the vehicle. I'm not going to grind and spend dozens of hours grinding for it. That's insane. And because we can have absolutely nothing nice, there are also a ton of other problems in the game, such as requiring always online connectivity, which is already sucky, but they've got such massive server issues that every time that they go down for maintenance, it can take up to 24, or last week it took 30 hours for the servers to come back online, meaning that for 30 hours, players just couldn't play the game that they bought, in most cases, for $70. They just couldn't play it. Not single player, not online, nothing. And when the developers were asked about it, they said that they did it to cut down on cheating, when we all know full well it was done so that they can constantly push these microtransactions in every which way. And you know what this reminded me of? Shadow of War. This was a game that released back in October of 2017. which is unbelievable to think, but that's 5 years ago. And that game was known for having one of the most aggressive loot box implementations of any game to that point, going on and up against games like Battlefront 2, which is not a title you want. To put it simply, in Shadow of War, there were two main phases of the game. There was the main campaign, and then the true ending, which bookended it way over here, off screen, apparently. And so what you would do is you'd play through the main campaign. Maybe it takes you 25, 30 hours or something to get through it. And then you're tasked with fully upgrading your orc army and preparing for battle and defeating all the fortresses and building everything up. Basically, they want you to max level everything. Okay, some people will really enjoy doing that, especially if they like the core gameplay loop. Cool. So players started to grind it at launch, and they noticed it was taking an unbelievably long time to get to that true ending of the game, which only happened once you had fully leveled all of your orcs and gotten to this legendary status on everything. And it was because there were in-game loot boxes and microtransactions for you to buy legendary orcs outright. So you wouldn't have to find them out in the world, generated dynamically, defeat them, recruit them, level them up by sending them out on missions and tasks. You wouldn't have to do any of that. If you just paid a set amount of money, you could get a legendary orc, place him in control, done. All good. And again, going back to the idea of balancing, the developers built this whole system up in a way that pushed players towards the microtransactions. In effect, they were saying, if you don't want to engage with microtransactions, you can get to the midpoint of the game, not see the true ending, but you play it for 20 hours, you walk away, you leave, you don't get to actually finish the game. If you want to finish the game, you got to pay us more, which is just crummy as all get out. It's unbelievable. And as a result, the game was panned because it sucked. People wanted to play the game. They wanted to see the actual credits, the real ending, but it would take, by some accounts, an additional 60 to 80, by some accounts, even 100 hours of grinding, of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again to get to that true ending without spending any money. It's ridiculous. And in that case, 5 years ago, the developers eventually, it took 280 days, but eventually they removed the microtransactions fully from the game, reworked the end game so that it wasn't totally ridiculous, and left the game like that, which is the version of the game that you'll play today if you buy it, or if you play it on Game Pass, for example. It's the new version, not the old version. Which is kind of funny because it really does show that the developers knew full well what a properly balanced game would look like, and they were capable of doing it, but they either chose or were forced to by the publisher to just totally wreck the balancing and the end game for sake of potential profits. What's funny is when a community manager over at Monolith Productions, the developer behind Shadow of War, was asked about all of this, they actually had a pretty balanced and even-handed take on the whole situation after the fact. They said, quote, "While purchasing orcs in the market is more immediate and provides additional player options, we have come to realize that providing this choice risked undermining the heart of our game, the Nemesis system. Simply being aware that they are available for purchase reduces the immersion in the world and takes away from the challenge of building your personal army and your fortresses," end quote. And this is what's so amazing, is that this, almost word for word, you swap out like orcs and replace it with cars, it applies perfectly to Gran Turismo 7. All of these microtransactions pull you out of the immersion you feel in the world. It pulls you out of just enjoyment of the game that is a good game at its core, and instead reminds you that you're just trying to be sold to. And it sucks. It just sucks. Like I said at the top, I played through a few hours of Gran Turismo 7 in preparation for this video to talk about it, just to get a feel for it. And all over the place are pushes for you to engage with the microtransaction system. And what's really annoying is that the publishers, the developers, and even the original creator of the franchise seems totally I guess, dismissive. It's not even oblivious. It's dismissive of the frustrations of their players. They don't care. Right now in the game, if you launch it, there's a special note if you hit circle on the main menu, which pops up and describes how the game's creator is interested and also troubled by these recent developments and the concerns of players, but he really wanted to make a great game, and he basically says nothing in the statement. And it's made all the more bitter because, of course, they went and patched the game later to make the grind even worse after all of these concerns were heard and apparently misunderstood, or perhaps even understood, by the publishers and the developers. And in what should be the ultimate wake-up call for the developers and for everybody involved with Gran Turismo 7, players have started using scripts to grind out the game on their behalf. That's right, they're using scripts to avoid playing the game so that they can get to the point where the game is effectively playable and where they can purchase cars that they can't afford without microtransactions or totally unreasonable grinding. According to this one user who claims to have used the exploit that this individual developed using a script and the PC remote play version of the game, he says that it's generated him, quote, 15 million credits per day, which, if purchased by Gran Turismo 7's controversial microtransactions, would have cost him roughly $120. That's unbelievable. I cannot believe that this is something worth saying nowadays. I thought we were past this like 5 years ago. I thought we figured this out. But if players are going to great lengths to set up scripts, PC remote play things where they have overlays set up in a specific way so that the script automatically puts inputs in overnight so the game can just run and grind, earning credits. If players are willing to go to that extent to avoid playing your game so they can get to a point where they consider it playable, that should be a huge wake-up call. Your crafted experience is so obfuscated by crap that players don't even want anything to do with it. They're letting scripts and code run the game for them instead. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I know it's easiest just to say, hey, PlayStation, wake up. This seems to be a PlayStation issue, which I'm sure is a huge part of it. But you cannot overlook the fact that the game's creator and the development team are actively doubling down on this and making the gameplay experience worse, trying to capitalize on all of the discussions, because I'm sure Gran Turismo 7 is receiving more purchases bought than ever, just by the free publicity that they're getting right now. People are like, yeah, I'll try it. Yeah, I'm bored. I'm done with Elden Ring. I'll give it a shot. And then they hop on, they throw $5 into the microtransactions because the grind is pretty bad, but they're like, you know what? I'm not a whale, so it's totally fine. I'm sure they're just doubling down and cashing in. But the point is, it's the developers and the publishers, and maybe there's some sort of bonus involved. Maybe it's that PlayStation is saying, hey, listen, if you really push these microtransactions, we'll throw a little bit extra cash your way, which is why it seems so particularly aggressive. But either way, it's totally unacceptable. Sony, PlayStation, and the developers behind Gran Turismo 7 should be absolutely embarrassed. This is unbelievable. And your players have made this overwhelmingly clear, and you can see that, I'm sure, on social media with Gran Turismo 7 trending for all of the wrong reasons, and also in the user score over on Metacritic, which you should never look to as an actual grade of the game's quality, but usually it's a good grade of the public's perception of a game at any given moment, which is an important delineation to make. Because in this case, as you can see with the original critic score versus the user score, the game at the core of Gran Turismo 7 is a good one. The racing sim here is great. It is. I've played it. It's great. It's a great racing sim. But the crap that's encased around it is just horrible. And it's so aggressive and just unashamed. It honestly takes me back. Like, I thought we were past this in 2017 with Battlefront 2. That game received so much hate that EA was threatened by Disney that they would lose their access to the Star Wars IP. Disney's stock price took a massive hit as a result of all of the outrage that that game generated because of its aggressive microtransactions. I thought that would have been a lesson for these publishers, these developers, but apparently it's just not. And the fact that they're doubling down is just, I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss for words. But you know what? If I talk any more about it, I'm just going to keep getting more and more angry. So I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comment section below. If you think I'm blowing it out of proportion, I would like to know. But I find this ridiculous. I can't get into it. I'll just spin in circles and get angry. So let me know what you think. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. Tune in Monday for the first part of the Ghost of Tsushima critique. We're going to be posting a new part of the critique every single Monday for the next 4 weeks. It's going to be a good one. So make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of when that goes live. Other than that, I love you all very, very much. I'll see you in the next video or over on Twitch for a stream or two between now and the next video. So see you over there. Much love. Stay safe, everybody. I appreciate you. Bye-bye.